everyone. My name is Will Davis. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at CData, and I want to thank everyone who around the world is joining us for day one of our Foundations event. And for our closing keynote today, we have something truly special lined up. As you know, with any decision or action taking off of data, timing is critical, and AI is no different. So please join me in welcoming Mike Gualtieri. He's VP and Principal Analyst at Forrester Research as he presents real-time data for AI opportunity. Mike is one of the leading analysts in the world when it comes to AI, sort of what vendors are doing, what end customers are doing, and what's next in this space. So we feel really fortunate to have him joining us to close out day one of our conference. And then just a quick note here, we should have time for Q&A at the end of the session. So as questions come up, please enter them into the chat and I'll bring them up for Mike at the end of the session. So without further ado, Mike, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Will, and hi, everyone. So happy to be here. This is obviously my favorite subject. This is what I do. I think about enterprise AI specifically, and especially operationalizing it and the intersection between what we think of enterprise data. So I want to walk you through how we've been thinking about this, and especially from a business sense first. But then I'm going to follow this up with, or end this with, what to look for when you're trying to implement. Because what we found is many companies, yes, they're still in the experimental phase, but they're anxious to actually roll out a number of AI use cases. And it's a very different thing to do something experimentally, to do a proof of concept, as you know, than it is to sort of roll something out into production and to do it for dozens and dozens of use cases. So let me, there we go. Let me give you that business backdrop. So, you know, when you boil things down to what actually matters to the business, it's outcomes, of course. I mean, you know, businesses are measured by those outcomes, and it's usually not just one or two. There can be multiple outcomes. But what influences those outcomes are decisions, and I think that's why everyone is, you know, one of the reasons why everyone's interested in AI, because the decisions that an enterprise makes are going to determine its success and failure. And those decisions that are made every day, every month, every quarter, there's different types of decisions, right? There's decisions that are made by leaders of that company. And these are big decisions. We're going to acquire this company. We're going to divest this company. We're going to enter a new market. We're going to hire more people. We're going to invest in some new technology. Those are strategic decisions. And you know, when we think of AI right now, we're not talking about AGI, artificial general intelligence, where we've got an AI that actually is the executive team of the company, yet we're not talking about it. But we're talking more about the tactical decisions, the everyday decisions, and the repeatable decisions. So AI doesn't really yet apply to these type of leadership strategic decisions, although AI can be used to help with those insights. So what we're really talking about are those operational decisions, a lot of which are made by employees, exception type handling, but increasingly also those decisions embedded in applications. And you might be thinking, oh, I have too many decisions. Well, you know, a lot of things are classified as a decision. So if you're a credit card company and there's a transaction, you have to decide if it's fraudulent. If you're an e-commerce company and you're trying to market and increase the value of the shopping cart, you have to decide what products to recommend, right? Where you have to decide, maybe I'll use an LLM to, you know, enhance this message. So it's collectively, all of these decisions are what influence the outcomes for that company, right? And so from a business standpoint, when I talk to enterprises around the world, that kind of resonates as sort of what's foundational behind the reason for implementing AI. So I just wanted you to think about it in that way, because when we link that to the need for data for AI to make those decisions, right? Because AI can't make it without having data. And AI is getting more complicated because we have predictive AI, which is sort of the class of AI that we did prior to generative, right? And it's still incredibly valuable. It just has lots of different techniques. You could have a random forest, a support vector machine. There's many different machine learning algorithms that create predictive AI, but it does things like, make product recommendations or predict when a machine's going to fail. And now, of course, comes generative AI. You know all about that, ChatGPT, and all of the use cases. And now we have agentic AI, and agentic AI consists of one or more agents. And we're not talking about the chatbot, right? That's kind of an agent, right? A chatbot. We're not talking about that. We're talking about something that actually manages a process, right? That's pretty interesting. But all of these have something in common, and that is their need for data, right? And at Forrester, we believe that it's probably said too much, like we're in the age of AI, but we do think that this is as significant as the Industrial Revolution. And the Industrial Revolution essentially gave us machines that we can, doing the work of 100 people can now be done by one person. And a lot of people never thought that, AI would, they thought it would be like robotics first. That's happening too, right? But AI is now doing for our minds what machines have done for our muscles. But to do that, we also need to understand the environment. And if you think about things like OpenAI that are trained on historical data, yeah, that's important. But the world changes and the information changes. And if you're an enterprise trying to make the best decision, well, you better have that real-time information as well. So, we believe that there's going to be thousands of specialized AI agents that are going to do many different tasks. And in some ways, it's the last mile of automation. Because if you're an insurance company or your bank, you'll know the term like straight through processing. Really, any company, right, with software, what you're trying to do is you're trying to automate some of the processes, right? But if it's not fully automated because there's some judgment calls, that's where a lot of companies are saying, what maybe AI can help. But when we think of decisions also have to be made in a certain amount of time. Don't have forever. You don't want to make a decision too quickly. And when you think about all the different use cases, like deciding what carrier assignment to meet a delivery promise, right? That has to happen now with the current information. You're not going to ask ChatGPT what carrier I should assign to deliver this load to, the Walmart distribution center. It can't answer that, right? So you're going to need the right information to do that. And now, if you think in your own business, what decisions are made in software or by people, that need to be made that are time boxed, right? That we don't have forever to make, right? And again, these aren't these strategic decisions made necessarily by leaders, like what are we going to do next month or next year, right? These are these everyday decisions. Preventing a customer churn. A customer is going to decide to leave right now, maybe not tomorrow. So what can we do to prevent that? Is it transaction fraud, right? Think about assets, manufacturing processes, or energy exploration, supply chain, right? These are very expensive assets, and those decisions have to be made. And the point is, you've got these, and every business has many of these. So that, again, is kind of the business requirement that we have here, and that is the opportunity for AI. So we're starting with these, and I'm not calling them business problems, because it's not a problem. Companies are they have methods for deciding the precise amount of agrochemicals. They already have, they already know how they're going to make investments, for example. They already have methods for that. But the point is that they now want to make more precise decisions, better decisions, and they want to use AI to do that, right? But again, they are constrained by the time and by real time. So real time simply means business time. A lot of people will say, "Oh, well, we don't have any real time." Well, real time doesn't mean, it doesn't have to be the speed of a equity trade, although that is real time. But in supply chain, it might mean minutes or hours or even a day, right? Or from a customer shopping, it might be 250 milliseconds. So the way to think about real time, fresh data, live data, the way to think about that is in business time for the use case. And the other thing I would assert is that all data originates in real time. So when companies say I don't have real time data, really? Well, when you made that transaction, that data was created in an instant. And when companies say they don't have real time data, what they really mean, we're not leveraging it, we're not using it. Or maybe they're using it somewhere, but not everywhere, right? Unfortunately, I don't know if I should say unfortunately, but okay, unfortunately, when people think of data and AI, they mostly think of like a data lake or a data warehouse because they need that data to sort of train a model. That's fine. You do need that. And lots of investment have been made in that. But when you think about these real-time use cases that I just went through, you also need live data. And the reason for that is that AI, in conjunction with the data it was trained on and the data it's going to use in the moment, is going to come up with insights about the environment. It's going to make decisions based upon that, and those decisions are going to lead to some action. We'll let the transaction go through, or we'll kick it out to investigate further, right? And at Forrester, we call those insights perishable. So we've created this framework we call the perishable insights framework, and to help companies think about what data they should think about using when they're making these real-time decisions with AI. Unfortunately, in the enterprise, legacy systems are not oriented towards that, right? They were oriented towards sort of after the fact, going through data and making these slower decisions like, well, what was our daily sales? What was our quarterly? And then like course correct at that time. That's not how business works now. You've got to course correct constantly, daily. And so unfortunately, these systems, the data originates in some system, there's some insights performed, and in many cases, a decision is being made that's no longer fresh, no longer valid, and the action taken could actually, have a bad impact. So this is something we call our perishability insight. And if you see this diagram, we divide this into 4 sections. So we've got real-time insights, operational insights, performance insights, and strategic insights. So the strategic insights are those decisions and insights that leaders need. Much of it is intuitive and opportunistic as well. That's not what we're talking about here. And then we've got the performance insights and the operational insights. Performance is like, well, how are we doing? What are our metrics? Operational insights, a little less time sensitive, but increasingly more time sensitive. So it's kind of borderline there with real-time insights. But this is where companies have spent lots and lots of money, right? Data warehouses, data lakes, so they can do analytics. And I'm not saying that's not necessary. It's absolutely necessary. That's where there's been a lot of investment. But where they need investment now is on getting those real-time insights using live data from multiple sources. So you've probably read this slide and you can kind of see an example of each one of those, right? And here's another example. So, in your business, you could take any particular probably business process, customer experience or internal, and kind of map out these use cases. And if you do it on a whiteboard, you'll get tons of these. And then you can think, oh, well, actually, how am I making these decisions now? And again, you probably are making a decision with them, but the question is, how can I use AI to make that decision better? The intent of this presentation isn't to tell you how to find use cases, but that is actually how you can find AI use cases too, going through that same process. So the insights gleaned from that data it can perish in real time. And again, real time for some use cases could be minutes, could be seconds, could be microseconds, like if you think of algorithmic trading, right? And AI is being used along all of these time vectors. So how do we solve this problem? You can't generally solve it with current technical architecture. Because if you look at a bank, or you look at an insurance company, or you look at a large manufacturer, any large company that's grown over a number of years, they don't have the most up-to-date systems. That's not practical, right? What they do is they evolve the systems and applications. And if you're working at a large enterprise right now and you ask, or you ask your tech leaders, oh, what's our portfolio of applications? It's in the hundreds, sometimes the thousands. You think of acquisitions. So the point is, you've got this legacy estate, call it, right, of applications and all the data that legacy applications. So everyone looked at this and said, yeah, it's a real problem. What do we do? Oh, let's put it in a data warehouse, data lake, then we'll have access to it. Yes, but if AI is making real-time decisions, it needs that data, but it also needs the fresh data. So what we call this live data, and we call it live data because it's like the system of record of stuff. Yeah, you need historical data. AI, just like a human, would use some historical data to make a decision, but you also need to know what's happening right now in real time. So a better term than real time is actually live data. I said you can't do it because it's a mess. So what you need is an abstraction layer over all of that data. And again, that's kind of what people have done with data warehouses, right? They've created data warehouses, data lakes, usually multiple of them, right, for different parts of the business, so that people can do an analytics on that, after the fact analytics on that. And sometimes that's building machine learning, so that's fine. But it's insufficient for live AI. It's insufficient for AI that's operating the business, AI that's collaborating with other AIs, AI that's collaborating with people to make those decisions that happen right now in the business, of which there's dozens and dozens of use cases. And the other thing about live data, and specifically about AI, is that AI really isn't, I always remind people, AI is software, right? It's like we're categorizing AI as like it's a separate thing, but it's actually a special type of software, right? So it's going to be manifested in applications. And even before AI became, as big as it is now, modern applications had to have access to live data. So one example I thought of the other day was a hotel chain. They bought multiple brands of hotels. They have a customer loyalty system. They have reservation systems that might still run on a mainframe. The company I'm thinking of, it still does, but it's a giant company. The modern app is the mobile app for the customer that makes reservations, but also wants to see the impact of those points. But the loyalty system's over here, the reservation system's over here. It's different for multiple hotels, right? So the idea of a modern composable app is one that can, as soon as that reservation's made, get that live data, that real-time data over to that app, right? So it's already a need. Let's even forget about AI. It's already a need to have a live data layer that can access all of this data. But now you bring AI into it, and when you bring AI to it, you're not just displaying points, which I guess is nice, but now AI is making decisions that affect business outcomes on that data. So guess what? Yeah, you need the live data, but it also has to be extraordinarily accurate as well. So the way we have to think of AI is that it has to think. It has to think the way it doesn't think the way we think, but it has to think in the same time frame in which those decisions are made. And it can't do it. I don't care how many billions of parameters a model has. It could not make that carrier decision with great accuracy, because if it's operating on older data. it needs a combination of historical data, like what's worked in the past under these circumstances, but it also needs to know the circumstances. What is the weather right now? So AI, whatever the use case, it has to think on live data. But we still have that problem. We still have that problem is that we're not going to rebuild our entire enterprise architect. We can't. We're going to have to create abstraction layers. And if you think about the legacy, right, which is beautiful in its own way because it built the business, but now you need to tack on a modern, I call it a live data intelligence layer that connects the real-time data that's happening now with the historical data. It's live data, right? So I recommend to a lot of enterprises who are taking that next stage, going from the proof of concepts, the experiments, the science fair projects that they're doing, and they want to take the AI next stage, and they say, oh, well, what do we need to do that? We need an AI platform. Yeah, you do, but where are you going to stumble? You're going to stumble when you start rolling this out and you've created models that can't get the right data. And you might be thinking, well, how can you create those models in the first place? Well, because you have a lot more time. Because if you're creating models, whether it's an LLM, where you might not be creating an LLM, could be fine-tuning it, but you might be creating a RAG database from that, vector database. But if it's predictive AI, you're training a model, you have a lot more time because you're hypothesizing on, it's a development effort and you're not developing in real time. So yeah, I need that data over there, send me that spreadsheet. Okay, I'll make a SQL call here. So you have the luxury of getting the data in one place to build the model, build the prompts that are going to call the model, build the vector database if that's what you're doing. You have that luxury. But once that model is deployed, you don't have the luxury because now that model needs the inputs to make those decisions. And to do that, it needs quick, complete, and accurate access to all data sources. And that's what we call live data. So it's really a prerequisite to rolling out AI. So I've given a lot of thought to, well, what are these core live data capabilities? And actually, we have a much larger list here. But given the time constraints, I want to talk about these 5. Now, obviously, you need to be able to connect to a lot of different data sources, right? So you need connections to databases, to applications, to message queues, to cloud sources, to object stores, maybe even to historians, which are kind of used in manufacturing. So the first requirement is that it has to have connections. Now, almost every company kind of bandies about the notion of a connection. Oh yeah, we get that, we have a connection there. But all connections aren't the same. Guess what? You're making that carrier assignment, if I can bring us back to that. What if you needed data from 5 different sources and one of those connections was down? Is there a strategy for that? Is there a reconnect strategy for that? Is there some caching strategy for that? So this isn't just sort of, we need a casual connection because it would be nice to have that data. This is a mission critical connection because we're using AI to make these decisions. Now, not all applications require robust security. I mean, I guess if you're doing some, public website or something, that's unimportant, but a lot of the enterprise use cases absolutely need that robust security. And that security usually exists in the source platform, but it must be carried on as it's extracted, as that live data is being used by the AI. It cannot be vulnerable during that connection process. So you also have to look at the connections and how it not only connects but moves that data to the next stage. And does that meet your security requirements? Now, once you have your connections, you have to query it, but it may not be an easy query because you may have to transform it, join, filter, sort, add missing data values. And that requires some processing capability. So again, if you've got, say, part of the data is an object store, part of it is DB2, and another one is, I don't know, Couchbase, and you need data from all those different sources for AI to make some sort of decision in an agent to take the next step. There might be some blending, probably is some blending of that data that you need to do right now. Yeah, you could do that in the data lake for some analysis later, but no, for this use case, you need to do that right now. So it's not just about extracting that data. There has to be some capability. And then you, as the developer or the designer, have to make the decision, where do I do this? Do I do this in that live data layer, data intelligence layer, or do I do it in the app, right? So there's some architectural, but you want a platform that can do some of that, of course, without affecting the latency too much as well. And if I didn't make this point clear enough, I'm not just talking about the real-time data. Live data is also accurate historical data as well, because the real-time data, again, it might be that, well, there's weather and there's traffic and there's construction, but the historical data might be, well, this is the best alternative carrier to get it there, at least within a day of when we thought we could. Right, so you have to enrich both of these again, with latency affected. Development, right? So part of what we've done with this live data intelligence layer is we've abstracted a ton of the complexity underneath. That's what we want to do, because we don't want every AI project to have to, dig deep, make its own spaghetti connections to all these data sources, right? We want a consistent fabric that will do that. And we need development tools to define those connections, to define what queries, views, right? Because views can simplify. If you're taking things from multiple sources, a single view can represent what you're actually trying to look at. And of course, operational tools, because this layer, this live data layer is an essential layer for AI. So it has to be able to manage it as well. And the other thing that I think is increasingly important, but also complex, is governance, because you want to be able to manage that live data layer and what it represents to the business, because that's how AI is going to use it. And the reason why I say it's complex is because the same notion of governance of data is necessary in many other places in the organization and for analytics too. So it's likely that some of the governance, at least of the definitions of data layer, are going to be duplicated for different courses. But the point is, it's necessary in some respects for this live data layer. Scale, of course, is important, right? Because again, we're not doing a sleepy end-of-month query or even end-of-day query or even a casual dashboard query that we can just rerun or we can rerun again, right? This is AI making decisions and applications, right? So it has to have a fault-tolerant layer. That live data layer is not a nice to have, it's a must have, and it's going to be fault-tolerant. So when I look at platforms, I look at different fault-tolerant strategies, right? It's not enough. The hyperscalers like to say, oh, we're 99.99. Okay, yes, that's wonderful, because we want the underlying infrastructure to be up, but there's other things. What about, can there be a rolling software upgrade? If there's a software upgrade, what if there's a new connection, right? So there's the notion of fault tolerance is more complicated, than simply some statistics or just duplicating infrastructure that's necessary. You're also going to need high throughput for many use cases, right? So yeah, it might be simple, like that carrier example I keep giving you. That doesn't sound high throughput unless you have a lot of assignments, but still, But if you're doing credit card transactions and you're trying to determine fraud, and fraud can be very complicated and need lots of different live data. A lot of credit card companies still do the detection like a minute after the transaction because there's so much, it's so difficult to do. But you know what? A minute's better than the next day, and it's better than an hour. And then in some cases, those decisions have to be made in ultra low latency, right? I mean, think of a lot of your use of ChatGPT and how jittery that is. That's not good, right? So that layer also has to, and it's not just the performance of the model, but it's getting the data to the model and then doing something with the data outside the model. So those latency aspects are important as well. So you've got to look at that in the live data layer. Deployment, look, every company has some sort of cloud strategy. Usually nowadays, the largest of enterprise, it's multi-cloud. And usually that includes their own colo, right? But however that's deployed, it has to work efficiently, right? You can't like duplicate an entire data set. So, and that's the other kind of notion of a live data layer, is that there's going to be some balance between needing it all, needing some caching, because it's not, you can't like suck every ounce of data like some people do in a data warehouse for live data. There's strategies of what data you need and what you don't. You don't want that added to the cost. And I've already mentioned kind of the deployment freedom. There's many different use cases of where you define this layer. The best way to define that layer is if you never even had to think about this, right? If there was just a single layer, a live data layer, and wherever those source data were, that's the whole point, is to abstract the complexity. And the complexity includes where it all lives out in your environment. So, my assertion and my research shows that companies that are rolling out the most use cases and are most successful have some notion of this live data intelligence layer. So it's a prerequisite to doing and rolling out scalable AI. So data has always been something that's been talked about as important, but it's usually been about collecting the data to train predictive models. But when you start thinking about predictive, generative, and now agentic, it's using the live data to operate these models, or for the models to think on that live data becomes just as important. So live data access is a prerequisite to operational AI. There's many different ways to achieve this technically. And yeah, maybe you don't want to do the huge project. You probably don't, right? Because that's what they tried to do in data warehouses. They said, okay, here's our entire universe. We're going to build a big data model. And then the data warehouse project took forever. So maybe you do it project by project with those connections, but you do it with a software infrastructure that then lets you keep adding to that without adding complexity to the entire deployment. So, enterprise architects, solution architects, tech leaders should really think about that live data access as they roll out AI. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to you, Will, and look forward to any questions anyone may have.
Thanks, Mike. That was a great session. I would say the term live data intelligence layer is one I'm going to have to steal from you. And and any presentation that has a billions reference and a picture of Bobby Axelrod is a winner in my book. So
I'm glad you noticed. I'm glad you noticed.
So first question is, I guess right now, like in all the companies that you work with, what are things that companies are getting right most commonly, and then what are companies most commonly getting wrong with AI?
Yeah, so I think I've been covering this for a long time, and that means that I was covering it when it was very data scientist centric, right? So you probably remember a few years ago, I think Harvard Business Review said data scientist, sexiest job and everything. And that was the teams that were creating the machine learning models. But then you got the complaints like, oh, well, the problem is it's not creating the model. We can do that, but it takes 6 months to deploy it, 9 months to deploy it. So, being the researcher I am, I just simply said, well, why does it take so, why can't you deploy it this weekend? The model's done. And inevitably, the answer always resulted in that data problem that I described. That, oh, well, that's because the model needs these two data fields from this database. And now we have to implement like an in-memory data grid. We have to cache the data. Like there was some data access problem. So I'm talking, I'm answering your question like what's positive. Well, part of what's positive is that AI is so popular now that just about everyone better get it on their resume, right? Including the tech leaders, including enterprise architects and solution architects. So when there was an AI project at an enterprise, they would just go to, oh, these data scientists need this, just kind of sign off. So this is a long story where the point is that people who are experts at delivering enterprise software solutions, whether they're customer, are now kind of in charge, right? Data scientists are still critical, but now we've got people at banks and insurance companies, enterprise architects, developers, and solution architects that know the rest of it, right? How do I get this running inside software? How do I think about how it's going to change the user experience? How do I test it? Like, because data scientists can test the model, but they can't test it. So I would say that's a very, very positive direction. The sort of the downside to this, I just kind of presented it, which is they're being very myopic when it comes to the, what I've been calling the live data requirement, right? Because they're still in this one, they're still in this, I won't call it experimental, but they're still in this, okay, we'll implement this one, and then we'll implement this one. They're starting to accumulate technical debt when it comes to that live data, which is why I'm trying to tell everyone, whoa, think about this live data layer that you need, because you're going to, if you don't, you're going to accumulate technical debt and you're going to create your own version of spaghetti.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like when we say live data, real-time data, it's like thought of as streaming most commonly, but people don't know that like live data doesn't need to fit into that streaming context. It can exist in any business. And I think that's something that's what we see is like commonly misunderstood. I'm interested to get your take on that.
Yeah, and I was using the word real time and live, but I'm using real time to describe some data that's happening right in the moment at which you're making the decision that they're using the AI data. But live data is more encompassing because it includes all of the data. So live data includes real-time data, but it also includes historical data from multiple other sources. So that's why I think as an umbrella term, live data is more appropriate. Because yes, I mean there's streaming data that is sort of just the real-time data, right? But that also needs to be enriched and somehow with historical data as well. But so I think live data is a solid term to describe that.
Great. And then when you're talking to companies and they're describing what they're doing with AI, what functions within organizations do you think are at this point utilizing AI most effectively? And do you think that will change in the next 3 years? Like, do you think it's going to move from like content gen to something else? I'm just curious, where you see it.
Yeah, I mean, interesting you said content gen, because we just did some surveys, right? And like B2B marketing content, B2C. So, the Gen AI stuff has just been a boom to content generation, but also just, research as well. So that is like a very, very big use case right now for content generation. We also see, so I'm going to talk about some use cases that are already in effect, but the Gen AI has made it better, like so call center type stuff, like self-service, right? We've had chatbots for a long time, but wow, look, the LLMs can be so much more specific. There's some downsides to that too. Automated document processing, bringing documents. We had that before, but now it's made much better with this. Coding. Using models for like code gen has been big. But the ones that I think I'm most excited about that are starting to kind of accelerate are these industrial use cases, big asset classes, right? Keeping that stuff running. So in the past, you'd call it predictive maintenance. But you know what everyone is starting to talk about, and we'll talk about in 2025, is agentic AI. Because agentic AI really starts to get into the process automation, right? It kind of, I call it kind of the last mile in process automation. That gets super interesting because it's not just like one model. It's not like request and response. I call the model, I get the answer, I do something with it. No, it's like I call it, it solves a piece of the puzzle of, like, say I'm processing an auto claim, but then has to wait for the photos to come in, and then some other model does something. So with that, you're going to need agentic, I call it agentic state management, which is sort of a variation of, it's a subset of live data. And every time that agent wakes up to do the next step, it's going to need access to live data that includes that agentic state.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had, as part of the Amit's keynote, our CEO's keynote earlier this morning, we had one of our partners, UiPath, join, and Arun, who is the VP and GM of the process mining product of UiPath, he talked about agentic, and sort of where they're going with that. So it maps really well to what you just mentioned. Cool. Two last questions, and then we'll do a quick outro for and get you out of here, Mike. What is the most overhyped part about AI, and maybe most underhyped in what you're seeing?
Well, I think the overhyped part is fear. That it's dangerous, and there's probably people that don't like me for suggesting that it's not. I mean, I don't think it's more dangerous than any other technology. It's dangerous, but the people, and I made this point, with your other question, the people who are responsible now for AI are people that are expert in an organization for delivering enterprise applications, and whether that's an ATM machine, they understand all of the moving parts. What they've had to understand is kind of the probabilistic nature, the uncertainty. There's certainly hallucinations, but there's strategies to mitigate those risks that that have emerged to the point where a lot of people who understand it aren't even talking about them because they just know, okay, they have to implement it. But I do think that the fears are overwrought. Now, if we want to get into some sci-fi stuff, I could scare you, but let's not do that. Because I always say to people, I say, okay, what's the worst thing? Like, as long as we can unplug it, right? We can stop the software, we can control it. So I guess I'm going to go there anyway. So if at some point AI has the capability to persuade us, a large amount of people, it will persuade us not to unplug it. That's the danger. We're many years ahead than that.
Okay. All right. So remember that 5 years from now when you
so
have that urge.
That was the overhyped. I guess the underhyped, right, is I think we talked about that too, which is the automation, the automation part of this. Because again, most of these use cases were kind of like, if you look at a business process, most AI use cases are taking one step in that business process that already existed and making it better. But the agentic part of it is, step one is going to be running the process, right? And then step two, and this is probably what he was talking about with process mining, is to analyze the process and maybe even, I hesitate to say it, but process re-engineering. Something that occurred with the advent of software 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, that's what it was really exciting to have them provide their perspective, is the amount of processes they have visibility into, and then you can embed AI into that, and the connections that we work with them on. It's pretty compelling. All right, last question. So as we move into 2025, we have a lot of different folks at the event that are in different roles within data analytics and data analytics leaders. What advice do you have for them or recommendations do you have for them as they're trying to advance their AI initiatives within their companies?
I mean, I guess I would, just off the cuff, three things. These are kind of things I remind myself of. Like the first one's a reminder that when we're talking about AI, we're talking about software, and we already know a lot about software, right? So there's people in organizations that sometimes they think of AI and they say, oh, I don't know AI. You do, because you've went through an SAP implementation. You've used software. So they have to think about that, because 80% of their skills, whatever their role is in like delivering software, maintaining it, developing software, 80% of it is totally applied to AI, right? And in any technology role, of course, you're always learning the next part, and you'll learn this next part. So you have a lot more capabilities in this than you probably think you do. The second thing is finding use cases in business processes that are consequential. I mean, this is kind of a no-brainer, but that have a big ROI. So, I mean, if you're going to do an experiment, you might as well do a big experiment, like that's going to have some real value to it. And then third, I would just reaffirm that that live data intelligence network is a prerequisite. Again, organizations know a lot about where the data bodies are buried, and they've gone through the process already with like data warehouses and data lake. Now think of this in a live data context, and you're going to be way ahead of other companies who are going to get bogged down with that technical debt.
Got it. Okay, I guess we have time for one last question. I've been told by our producers backstage that we have time for one last question. So, you mentioned this, the kind of the collaboration between business and IT, or technical individuals and business individuals, and sort of like identifying use cases with optimal value. Like, how do you see on both sides like that collaboration working, and like what have you seen work well when there's sort of this, IT brings a use case that they think a business counterpart can benefit from, and vice versa? Like what have been, as it relates to AI, what have you seen work, or what have you seen not work there?
I mean, this is kind of cliched, but you do have to start with the business. And even though we've had, however many years, 40, 50 years of like enterprise software, there's still sometimes people are not starting with that. So the best technical organizations are very aligned with the business. They think of them as their customer. And when you think of them as your customer, it's like, oh, well, you want to give them suggestions, but you really have to understand what is going on day to day intuitively in your gut to make those suggestions. And as a technical person, you are in a great position to do that, because the business people understand the business, they don't understand the technology. So walking through, so engaging with the business, walking through a critical business process and asking a question on each step. Is there a better prediction we can make here? Because AI is very good at making prediction. Is there a decision that we make here, or that we could make here, to make this process more efficient? And again, you do a whiteboard session like that, you're gonna come out with a dozen potential use cases that you can then sort of vet and figure out which ones will be most successful.
Great, awesome. Well, thanks, Mike. I really appreciate you joining us for our Foundations event today. The audience is from the chat is raving of the session that you just shared with us. So thank you so much for spending time with us. And yeah, but looking out for more research from you and following you on social media to see what's next. But really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Will, and thank you everyone for attending. Appreciate it.